So, did you succeed? Let's now build this together. And for that, I'll actually start with the models, because we'll need those models to make the data, the dummy data and the categories work, and thereafter I'll work on the UI. So for that, I'll add a new models folder to my lib folder here. And in that models folder, I will start with a new category.dart file, which in the end will be used by category start, because here I'm trying to import from it, and there I want to import this enum and a category class which can be instantiated like this. So which takes a category description as a string, or a category title as a string, as it seems, and a color. So in category Dart, I'll start by setting up this enum categories. The name is up to you in general, but here I'm referring to a categories enum, so hence the name I chose, which in the end simply should contain all these values you see here. So vegetables, fruit, meat, dairy, and so on. So here I'll grab this and add my vegetables, the fruit, meat, dairy, and then I also have carbs, sweets, spices, so we'll add that. Carbs, sweets, spices, and then also convenience, hygiene, and other. So convenience, hygiene, and other. And these are simply the kind of dummy categories we'll work with in this app. Of course, you could add more. For this app, that's all I want to use. And with that added, this error here should already be fixed. But of course, we still must add such a category model to really make this file here work. So therefore, I'll go to category Dart, and besides adding the enum here, I'll add a class in here, which I'll name category. And this class, in the end, should have two properties. It should have a title property, which can be of type string, because that makes sense as a title. And I want to store the color, which should be of type color. Now, the exact property names, of course, are totally up to you, but these are the property names I will work with. Now, the color type is not built into Dart, it's coming from Flutter instead, so to make it available in this file, we should import from Flutter the material Dart file into this category Dart file, because this then unlocks the color type. Now, of course, to instantiate this class here and create objects based on it and assign these values upon instantiation, we also should add a constructor function here. And it can be a const constructor function like this. And then here I simply want to accept this .title and this .color, and I'm using positional arguments here, so I have not wrapped them with curly braces, because here where I create my category, I also assign these arguments by position and not by name. I don't have something like title colon here, instead it's just the order that matters here for assigning these parameters. I also still got an error here regarding my fruit enum value, because I have a typo here. Of course, we should delete that. And with that, with the typo fixed and with this basic model set up here, this category start file works and doesn't show any errors anymore. Of course, you should make sure that the import here is updated and uses your project name here after package. But with that, we got the first thing out of the way, and we added this category model, which is great. And with that, we can already move on to the grocery item model. So for that, in the models folder, I'll add grocery_item.dart as a file name. And in there, I want to set up yet another class, which then can be used by importing it here in dummy_items.dart, and by then instantiating items like this. So by using named parameters, as you can see, and these named parameters specifically. So therefore, we can go to grocery_item.dart, and in there also add a new class, grocery_item, because that's the class name I am using in dummy items. And then there, as it seems, we will have an ID parameter, a name parameter, and a quantity parameter and a category parameter, and therefore probably also properties with those same names. An ID and name are strings, as you can see, quantity is a number, and category seems to be of type category. So that category class we just added, the type of that class, that seems to be the type of that category parameter and property. So therefore here, when setting up this grocery item, I want to add my ID, which will be of type string. I will add my string name, my quantity, and that should be a number. And here we could have a double or an int, and I'll go for an int here because, at least in this app here, I don't want to allow quantities like 1.5. Instead, you either have 1 or 2 items, so only full numbers. So that's why I'm using an int. And last but not least, I also will add a category, which should be of type category as mentioned. So here we can use that category, which we must import from our package here, from our project, from the models folder and the category.dart file. And with that added here, we can and should add a constructor, which can also be const, grocery item. And here, as you can see, I am using named parameters. I have a name and then a colon and then the parameter value. So therefore here I'll use curly braces and then assign my values to ID, name, quantity, and category. Now all these should also be required here because these properties must not be null. Therefore we must require these parameters. And as you learned, named parameters by default are optional. So to make sure that they are provided, we can and should add required here in front of every parameter. And that's then the grocery item model finished. Now with that, we're almost done, but I'm still getting an error here in dummy items. And in the end here, we learned that we should try removing the const keyword here because we're dynamically accessing the categories here. And of course, to make sure that categories works here, that this enum is available here, we also should definitely import from the category.dart file in the models folder, because that's where this enum is defined. So after finding and fixing those extra errors, you also finished this part. You added the models now, and you're using them correctly. And you also find my finished files attached to this lecture now. The finished data folder with its files in the final form, and of course the models folder with its files. You find a link to all these files attached to this lecture so that you can compare your solution to mine, and you can also use my files in case you got stuck or you were not able to reproduce this. And with that out of the way, we can now move on and start working on that UI before we then thereafter dive into the actual core content of this section and take a closer look at Flutter Forms.